if you're going to have these meaningful connections with people and go beyond the how's the weather, you have to like be thoughtful to be thoughtful. And it's something I didn't think I'd ever have to do, but as life has gotten more complex, I'm like, oh, it's not as easy to be the person I want to be without a pause and taking a step back and, writing out these goals or even just thinking out these goals and actioning on them.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Laura. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited for this episode. And before we dive in, I would love it if you would kind of give our listeners a little brief intro on who you are.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a UX director. I'm a dog mom of the world's okayest behaved but cutest German Shepherd puppy named Orly. Follow her on Instagram, orly.gsd. Just a little plug there. I'm a big fan of ultimate frisbee and kayaking and just being outside in general. So it's so great to be here.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And honestly, y'all, if you want really good content, I absolutely am obsessed with this account. Lauren is posting on there quite regularly, though, on the stories, I will say. And I just love Orly so much. And it's so cute to see how much they've grown, how much, like, she's.
She's my angel, even though she's so bad.
Oh my goodness. Well, today we are actually going to be talking about small steps towards big changes. The three main segments we're going to be really focusing on: recognizing what no longer serves you in life, breaking down bigger goals into smaller steps, things that are a little bit more achievable and obtainable. And the third is a round of call to action, things that a summary of everything that we're going to kind of talk about, along with a parting thought. To kick things off with the first segment, Lauren, I know that you and I had kind of talked about this previously as we were discussing, what specifically we wanted to talk about. And it was really fun, that planning session with you, of just kind of figuring out what is at top of mind of us. And I think this is something that you had initially shared with me, that there's kind of like this sense of bigger goals and dreams and things that you want to achieve and do, but kind of getting maybe caught up in those big and lofty goals and maybe not sure necessarily where to start. I was curious, like, if you had any initial thoughts around what prompted you to share that, or like what's been on your mind specifically around big lofty goals or feeling some type of way about them.
Yeah. So I guess just recently, well, not just recently, over the last 2 years, my life's really gained a lot of complexity. Bought a house, very old, lots of problems. Got a dog. Getting busier with work, and all these things. Some are super positive, some more negative. Family health issues, kind of just all of these things coming together at once, really affecting not only my mental health, but also just all of the goals that I think I have for myself, but I don't have time for or haven't been making time for actively. So it's just been top of mind of like really trying to latch on to all these goals that I've had or want to start growing towards and doing something about it. So I think like that is something, just kind of taking control back of all of these goals I've had or want to keep going with.
I totally see where you're coming from with wanting to work towards those goals. But I often feel like we get discouraged really easily when we have big ideas and they're not quickly becoming a reality, especially
Mm-hmm.
in a generation where things are so click, ready to purchase, it's there the next day, or you buy it and you have it immediately in your hands, or uh, instant gratification, the whole gambit around that. Based off of what you just shared as well, it reminds me of the factors that might be holding us back from achieving those goals. And as we kind of thought about this and brainstormed this a little bit, the first one that came up for me at least was time. And I
Mm.
often feel like I don't give myself either the time to work towards my goals, or it feels like I don't have enough time to devote towards those goals. Have you felt the same way?
100%. You can't see me, listeners, but I am nodding my head frantically because yes, time is literally that is something that has been my biggest issue is organizing time. And I know we'll probably talk about this in kind of a little bit later, just talking about, methods for, grabbing life by the horns, or grabbing these goals and running with them. But, that's something that I admire from you, is how good you are at organizing your life, and organizing your time specifically. And that's something that I've been extra trying to put my efforts into, is where do I put my energy, and like being a lot more conscious of how I'm spending my time and how it's serving me, in the long run, all these things that I'm doing in that time.
Literally, I applaud you so much because that takes so much effort to figure out what is serving you and what, as I think Marie Kondo says, spark joy, things that you find in your life that are either positive or negative or neutral, and just sifting through those things, being able to figure out if something is serving you in your life or not. If like it takes practice to be able to sit with yourself and to feel those things out, to ask yourself, like, where do I start? Do I have the skills to start thinking about this goal, or do I need to invest a little bit of time towards researching and understanding how I can achieve these goals? But that all again comes back to like that reassessing of how do we figure out what is serving us, what isn't serving us, not being afraid to express thanks to something, but then saying goodbye to it if we need to.
For sure.
That's
Pivot.
definitely something. Yeah, to pivot. Well, this is a great segment and pivot into the second part that we wanted to kind of discuss, which is breaking down those bigger goals into smaller steps. And when we had initially discussed this, Lauren, this topic of feeling like we have these big, lofty goals and not really sure where to go with it, I chimed in a little bit about like what I have been trying to do in my day to day routine, which is something that I didn't start till late last year, essentially, of
Mhm.
trying to find ways to break down these specific goals. I actually worked with this with my therapist. A shout out again to my therapist. I feel like
I love
I
your
need to just.
therapist.
It's so funny. I had another friend who said, like, give me your therapist's name and number. I gotta get in touch with them. But thinking about how can we start to break these specific goals down. So, for example, the podcast, for like
Mhm.
as an example of the podcast and setting this up, I had to start understanding the basics of how do you produce a podcast, how do you create a podcast, how do you design it, how do you publish it, how do you self-host and everything like that. But then if you break that down even further, it took time for me to invest in that research process and that knowledge gain. But then
Absolutely.
it also, like a step down from that, required me to be in a good place physically and mentally to handle that new information. So I had to make sure I was taking care of myself, taking care of my space. And so I'm curious, like, what has been kind of a lofty goal for you that you've been working on breaking down into those kind of smaller, more attainable daily goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the so this is a lifelong goal of mine, that I've my progress is pretty terrible for something that I've called a goal for so many years. But I've always wanted to be a polyglot. I want to be that person that, my grandmother spoke 7 languages. I want people to be able to say that about me, and I want to be able to travel anywhere and not worry about, acclimate. I want to acclimate myself to as many different cultures as possible, and it's just something that I've had on my list for so long. I would jump from one thing to another. I was a Spanish major. I took Quechua. I was learning some Chinese and some Russian and French, and I realized that I've been putting all of this energy into something that I wasn't doing it in a sustainable way. And it was not like all of this effort and time that I put in and that I thought I was doing in kind of an intelligent way, breaking it down and doing my 30-minute lessons a day. I realized that I wasn't, none of that language was sticking. So I've like finished Duolingo French twice. I've gone through Pimsleur, and yet I can't speak French. And my Spanish is kind of dwindling away. And so I've like had to pivot and been like, okay, if I want to be this poly, maybe I don't want to be a polyglot. Maybe it's readjusting my goal, or maybe it's breaking down to say, if I'm going to truly attain my goal, it's to become like kind of almost a perfectionist in each language if I can, and so like keep maintaining that. So I've taken a break. I've gone back and now I'm reading a book in Spanish poorly, and trying to get back into and like listening to Radio Ambulante and like all of these other podcasts in Spanish, trying to like get back to where I used to be, and also like if I'm going to go forward and say I'm going to be a polyglot, I need to actually be able to speak the languages that I've say are already under my belt. So yeah, it's a lot of pivoting, but that was a long-winded way to say yes. I've got some big lofty goals that I'm struggling with, but trying to get back to.
I admire that so much that you want to be able to go travel anywhere and be able to speak whatever language that you're good, like whatever country you're going to be in and such. Because I think I'm later this year hoping to go to Paris for my first time ever, but
Ooh la
I don't
la,
know
yes.
French.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, that's the place that's I'm gonna say that's where you might wanna learn some because I've had some awkward encounters, there. Just the 2 days that I went, I pronounced something terribly wrong and I got yelled at. So, we can
Oh
work
no.
on that together. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
I would absolutely love that, mainly because I think I will have a friend there who does speak French, but I would love to at least have some basic understanding of,
Yeah,
hi, where's the bathroom? Or, like, I need
that's
water or
crucial. Police!
yeah.
Just kidding.
So, what has been something that you've broken down from that process to get you into a better state of mind or physical state of being? Because from I can't remember what this process is, but I think it's just like the needs of human beings, and once when we have those needs met, we're able to like achieve the next level of
Yeah,
enlightenment or understanding. So I think it's like initially we need shelter and food, and then we need to feel safe, and we need to feel like I can't. I was gonna look up the process, but I need to look it up actually. But the higher you go up that chain of being able to determine like what your needs are and what they're being met, and then I think the last one is like enlightenment or something to that regard. Do
yeah.
you have do
Yeah,
you
no,
happen to know what that is?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. Yes,
Thank
I love
you.
that, and I love the way you frame that because I've honestly forgotten about that, but that's literally, like, exactly what you're saying is there's sometimes you have these giant goals, but it's you can't get to those without going into the even smaller details of, like, am I flossing regularly? Like, am I doing these, like, or am I keeping my house clean enough to where when I finally have time to, like, be creative or spontaneous or, like, sit down and try to, practice whatever language I'm trying to learn at the time, are all my other needs met? Is something holding me back, like a dirty house, from me actually getting to be creative? That goes down to the time blocking, especially. And I don't want this to only be about time blocking, but I genuinely feel like between getting a bullet journal recently, I'm getting back into it, and also using the Pomodoro timer for work, I'm like, I am literally time blocking out the things that I care about. And then also, I've got a checklist of things like the basics that I want to do every day so that I can feel like, when I finally do have downtime, it's specifically for me and not for maintenance. But yeah, yeah. What I want to know about you, I want to know what you do. I mean, obviously, your life is so much more organized. And I say obviously, I don't know if you've talked about just how organized you are on these calls, but I've seen your calendar before, and I'm just in shock and awe and just amazement at how when you're doing your meal prep, what meals you're doing, like I'm not going to say your entire schedule, but like you have so many things planned out. It's so weird because you're so organized, but I feel like you've got this spontaneous creativity that you can kind of achieve more because you've got your life together so much. Is that fair to say? Would you say?
Oh my gosh, you are literally so sweet to say that and so kind to say that. And
I mean it.
um,
You're so organized, it blows my mind.
well, that's really so thoughtful, and it means a lot because I do try really hard to be organized and put together. And sometimes I'm like, haha, my plan is working. Everybody thinks I'm this amazing organized person, and secretly deep down inside, I'm so insecure or something like I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
But to answer your question, I think what has helped me a lot is uh, what I've again been learning in therapy, which is you have to break these down to what can you do for 5 minutes a day for yourself at the bare
Ooh,
minimum, and that just kind of like stems from there. How can you get into a habit or routine that like will enable you to build upon other habits and other things in your life. So, one thing is meditating. I'm like, I can take 5 minutes a day to meditate and set an intention for the day. And it's so fascinating. I can tell that I can lower my heart rate by 20 beats
no
per
way.
minute every time that
20?
yeah, every time
Oh my
I look
gosh.
at it and like I'm about to, meditate. It's a guided meditation using Apple Fitness Plus. I'm not sponsored, but maybe I should get sponsored. Um,
Sponsor him.
but it's really nice because I can see my heart rate, and it's crazy to see most of the time. Like I would say 8, maybe 9 times out of 10, I can tell at least a 10 to 20, difference between the time that I start and the time that I don't, which then helps alleviate my anxiety and any like insecurity I'm feeling that morning. As far as habits, and you mentioned like my schedule, and y'all, she's not joking. My schedule is color coded like the rainbow
Mhm.
Skittles.
It's incredible. It's a sight to behold. But I love that. I know we talked about instant gratification and like working towards these bigger goals, but I feel like 5 minutes and you can tell your heart rate is lowering that much. Like that is those small steps are those little bits of instant gratification that build to this bigger, more calm, more present state of mind that makes you primed for your podcast and for work. And I love that. And I love that it's working for you so well. And you're inspiring me, one, to get a therapist, and two, to meditate.
I'm curious. You mentioned bullet journals. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So bullet journals, I don't know if every one of your listeners is on Pinterest as much as I am, but basically they're glorified checklists. There's different ways that you can set them up, but I've got my daily like things I want to do every single day. So obviously, like some of them I make easy, like floss. I'm like I know I'm going to do it. I just want to like mark it off, or like I have how much water I'm going to take in. So I've got a big old 100 milliliter water bottle next to me. I fill it up. I try to go through 3 a day. I almost never do, but when I have the checklist, it's this sense of gratification immediately, being able to fill in the bubbles and make it very aesthetic and pretty. You can go even further and like do mood trackers, which I love also. Just and I know you do mood tracking too with an app, but that's the beauty of it is having like you can do whatever you want and set whatever goals you have. And I try to give myself grace if I miss days, which I did yesterday. Don't take it so literally that you have to like check off every single thing that you do for the day. But if it's something that makes you feel like you're getting progress, or you can look at your bullet journal and be like, I thought I had a bad day, but I actually did a lot of the things that I wanted to do for me, even if I didn't get something done for work or whatever else doesn't work out. It's just something to like maybe it's more meant like a mental state, a state of mind of feeling like you're accomplished even on kind of your crappier days, which I still feel like helps, if nothing else, the bare bones that like the essentials of my mental health is checked off for the day, like was a good day after all. So
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And I love that idea of using the journal like that. I think, from what I remember, we also talked about like a poster board or some sort of like vision board or some sort of like thing where you can visually see your goals or something to like remind you of that. I think, were you mentioning you started something similar to that?
So I actually haven't done one. One of my friends did a huge one that she had hanging in her room, and it's definitely a big inspiration. But I also like I don't know if I want guests coming to my house seeing these big goals that might feel more private and personal. But I think having something accessible, like having a reminder that what you want to be or what you want to do, I think is kind of crucial to have. Like to if you have these bigger goals that aren't the instant gratification, you have to be able to keep them in mind and always be doing something to work toward that. If you want to be a creative person, you have to give yourself outlets. You have to remember to do things. I say remember to be creative, but there's lots of different examples of just if you want something, you have to keep it in top of mind. I'm very much a visual person, so I like to see a lot of things out. That's why I keep my bullet journal. Not only do I have it all like prepped for the start of the month, but I also keep it in like a public place where I can access it. Because if it's in my room or like in a drawer, I will not touch it for 3 months. But if it's out every day, I'll just go and pencil stuff off. So
I think you bring up a really great point because every person has their own routine, their own way of doing things. And I think it's important for people who have this desire to, whether it be, take inventory of their life, to better understand their goals in a way, to break those down, to find something that works for them. I know we've talked about a few already, a couple others that I think we had discussed earlier than this. Were like, I use Siri to set reminders for myself, mainly I don't always
love
trust
that.
Siri to get it right. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, they got it, 90% right. But I always have to tell myself if I don't write this down, I'm not going to remember it. If I don't ask Siri to remind me about it, I'm not going to remember it. And so I think finding ways that work for you in order to do this, like it all just is like start somewhere and take that first
Yeah.
step of figuring out your system.
I love that. I love that you set reminders like that. That's something I need to get into as well. Even just like little things. And I feel like maybe it sounds silly to feel like you have to have, a bullet journal or these writing down goals or this visual, but I genuinely think a lot of times if I don't do something like that, I'm not going to be the person that I want to be. Like, for instance, if I tap a text and I don't respond back right away, I will sometimes just forget completely. But my uncle will text me and I will be like, oh, it's so easy to respond. I just need to sit down and like have a thoughtful, like quick little paragraph for him. And then I forget and I push it off and I forget. And then I'm like, wow, if I set a reminder, then I could be, the niece I want to be.
I appreciate so much that you are so copious about the people that you interact with, and that's one thing that I am trying to aspire to be more about, is trying to remember things about people, so that way I can have a deeper interaction with them, like a more personal
Yes.
interaction with them, because it's so easy from day to day to, I say, hi, how are you, how's the weather, and it can
Mhm.
get really dull and really boring, and then you're just not going to remember who that person was or what they're doing or what's important to them in life. And so
Yeah.
a goal of mine is to be more like you, Lauren, and to either write down little like tidbits about somebody, like, oh, like I should ask them about this in their life, or I should, remember to follow up with them on this and just ask them how that went, but anyway,
Yeah.
so you inspire me equally.
Oh my gosh, stop. Yeah, I think it's wild to think that you have to be thoughtful to be a thoughtful person, and that's something I know it's kind of a little bit of a maybe I'm pivoting too much here, but like I think we've talked about this with, especially as your network grows. We work for a company where you might work with people in different offices and that you don't interact with often. I've literally started writing down, people's kids' names and their dogs' names and like, oh, they're in a house or something, like little things that I just feel like, if you're going to have these meaningful connections with people and go beyond the how's the weather, you have to like be thoughtful to be thoughtful. And it's something I didn't think I'd ever have to do, but as life has gotten more complex, I'm like, oh, it's not as easy to be the person I want to be without a pause and taking a step back and, writing out these goals or even just thinking out these goals and actioning on them. Is that a verb?
To kind of wrap up everything that we've been talking about, Lauren, I want to dive deeper into the initial thought process that we had shared about, of, recognizing what no longer serves us, but also how do we get started? And to boil that down even further, I want to know, like, what do we feel is kind of holding us back most time when we want to achieve a certain goal in our life? And I'm curious to know, what do you feel about when you think about that?
Ooh. Okay. What's holding me back? I mean, obviously, other than I probably just glossed over it a bit, but just the taking a step back and recognizing one, I know we just talk about goal setting and organizing that, but just understanding, making sure that you know the kind of person you want to be. I think that's taking time to self reflect, self care, if that's therapy or just a way to recognize, I feel like a lot of times we're just moving with the flow of working late hours or whatever you're doing with your life, but setting a time to figure out exactly what you want to do. And then after that, I really feel like something that's holding me back is that practicing self-compassion and remembering that like I don't have to do all of these things. I can organize my life in a way that I don't give myself hard deadlines, but I also put the silly things on the checklist like flossing or drinking water, things I'm going to do anyways, but just feeling accomplished. Also to that is learning to say no is kind of has held me back in the past of like, I don't know, even just going to weddings and recognizing my limits as far as budgets and recognizing my limits of what I can give and what's serving. Like, do I invest this many hundreds of dollars to go to this friend who has been a lifelong best friend's wedding, or do I go to this friend who I don't know as much and just that's a really terrible kind of mean sounding example, but it's kind of just this big thing of you have to take a step back, recognize what your goals are, what you want out of life and out of friendships, and really just start putting some boundaries down. And the first boundary just to protect your own mental health, and then after boundaries for the rest of the parts of your life, like your budgets and stuff. That's I don't know if that was a good answer, but that's my answer for that. I'm really interested to hear yours.
I really admire that, and I really appreciate your perspective on it, because I don't feel like we do that enough. I don't feel like I do that enough sometimes, and I have to like remind myself to take that step back and to ask myself, like, who was I? Who am I now? And who do I want to become? So I completely relate to what you're saying with that. What is holding me back most of the time? It's always so funny when I ask questions and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta make sure I have like my response ready to go.
I love it.
I would say it's really scary to put yourself out there and to be your favorite self, as I've shared before on this podcast,
Ooh.
of, not being your best self, but your favorite self. But like, that means being vulnerable. That means facing fear of rejection. That's facing, the fear of failure in that regard. It's a lot. And I think that's what a lot of us probably, have to work through day to day, is just like, is someone going to say what we're doing is not great? Are we not going to be able to achieve the goals that we're looking at? And I think it's important to recognize any amount of progress that we make in our life, but also to not feel like we have to be this overperforming individual in a capitalistic society. It's like figuring out like where can we make the progress that will make the most importance and difference in our life. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that all kind of sums up of just like, I think sometimes I'm afraid to change what I am now because of where I've been, and I don't know what's ahead. But
Mhm.
at the same time, something ahead might be amazing. That change and that progress and that evolution might be incredible. But it's kind of scary to make that progress because you don't know. It's the unknown, the fear of the unknown, but the unknown can actually be really exciting.
Yeah. I first petition to put "Be Your Favorite Self" on the next Queerly Overthinking swag or
Oh my
merch.
gosh,
I love that so much.
yes.
Um, but no, yeah, that's like that investing. I like it. Just invest in what you want to be and full send. I think that's, I actually, I want to change my entire answer and just say, yes, like that fear of whatever, just especially even thinking about the way that other people think of me and perceive me. I spent years not posting on Instagram. Even with Orly, I post on her stories because it's less permanent. And like, it's just something that I didn't expect to have so much anxiety over what other people think of me. And I'm like, wait, you're so right that like I'm starting to come to this point where I'm like, I'm okay to share things. I'm still like, I don't have to have this major anxiety after I post something of like people judging me, because it doesn't matter, because I'm having a good time. I'm not hurting anyone. And to your point, being my favorite self, I love that. I'm going to take that with me. Um,
Well, to wrap things up, Laura, I am going to share a quote from a favorite of mine, Brene Brown. I am very partial to Brene Brown. They said, "It's not about what can I accomplish, but what do I want to accomplish."
Ooh, wow, thought
Isn't that
starters. I'm
good?
snapping over here.
Oh,
Wow.
snaps. I actually have that posted at the very top of my goal list that I kind of reflect on every so often. And it's just like, it just reminds me that, I don't have to accomplish every single thing. I just have to focus on like, what do I want to accomplish?
Yeah. Wow. I want you to send that to me, as like, I feel like we're both very similar in the perfectionism category, at least for work. And so I'm very intrigued by this quote. I think I'm going to think about this later tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Lord, for taking the time to break these points down with me, and to share not only your thoughts and insights, but to kind of see where do we go from here. And I think that's what I love the most about doing this podcast, is just seeing how people with, again, similar events that they've gone through in life, but coming away with different perspectives and just bridging those perspectives together. I think it's magic, in my opinion. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is a dream. I feel so cool being on your podcast. So really, really appreciate it. And I, as always, love talking to you, Adam.
Same girl.
Queerly Overthinking is produced by Adam Harper and Cass Cooper. It is edited by Adam Harper, with audio mixing by Necessary Outlet Productions. You can follow Queerly Overthinking on Instagram at Queerly Overthinking, and find more at www.queerlyoverthinking.com.